So I was compulsively scrolling through Instagram the other day, like I like to do in my spare time, and I stumbled across a photography meme, one of those memes. I do enjoy the occasional meme, and it had something like someone looking through a book that said, "The secret to becoming a good photographer, just keep shooting." I'm just creating it for illustrative purposes here. That got me thinking of photographer Matt Piers, who we were lucky to feature in the latest issue of Framelines Magazine. We were lucky to include some of his documentary photographs at Birmingham and a short interview with him, but I felt like we only really scratched the surface and I really wanted to sit down with him and have a bit of a longer form chat about his work. We got to talk about Matt's methodology for approaching people for portraits and how he landed on primarily using a Rolleiflex for his work. Really cool to get to chat to Matt. It was actually like the day after he returned from a trip to Coney Island, and he very kindly sent me a few of the pictures he took hot off the press. I think this gives you a really great idea of how Matt's attitude and approach to photography can be applied absolutely anywhere. If you want to check out more of Matt's work, he has a zine called Normal Service Will Resume that I think he has a couple copies left of. You can check out his Instagram, which I'll link below. And we also have a few copies left of the latest issue of Framelines Magazine.
I actually really wanted to kick off with some questions from our Framelines community. We have a private Discord, like a little forum, and we have a like quite a big community of street and documentary photographers. And I reached out to them last week and said, "Hey, I'm having a chat with Matt Piers next week. Does anybody have any questions?" And I got a lot of really good questions. So
Ooh,
if you
that
don't
sounds
mind,
exciting. Yeah,
I'll kick off.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark Sugden asks, I'd like to ask Matt what draws him to his subjects. We've talked on here and at the meetups about how you choose a person you want to take photos of. Is it how they look, what they're doing, or do they fit part of the story you're trying to tell? I'd really love to hear Matt's thoughts on that.
Oh, I think that's a really good question. Well, Mark, I would say that you are attracted to a subject for, I think, a number of reasons. Sometimes it can be that you're just interested in a particular look, or that there's something that's making them stand out a little bit. And that doesn't mean to say that it's got to be extreme, but also I think there's an element of trying to be representative of a wider population. I recently had a bit of a minor, it ended up being a minor, but a bit of a health scare where I was given this kind of thought of it could be the start of something serious, or it was nothing at all and ended up being nothing. But that I had this kind of, from that news, I had this, right, I've got to go out and make work. I've got to go out and make more work. And I think that sort of exposed a bit of an underlying thought, was that if I'm not here anymore and people sort of discover what I've done, or it gets handed to somebody, that they can sort of look through and they can see a bit of a snapshot of our times, that there's different types of people, different ethnicities, ages, something that was representative of the time that I lived in. I thought, yeah, I think that's probably what I wanted to do.
Wow, so that really that gave you. I mean, you seem very prolific as it is. I don't know if this health scare came or when this came, but I mean, I always look at your photos and I just can't believe the volume of it. It seems like, yeah, I really want to know. Like, do you just have an incredible hit rate, or are you just out a lot, just putting the work in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Saying that I'm prolific is obviously very nice, but yeah, I think just keeping working, keeping sort of regular and working around it. I think, you probably, your sort of audience are probably sharing the same level of obsession, and they're thinking about when can they go out next, what can they do. So it's always working around those parameters of, right, okay, I can organise a lunchtime walk. What can I do? And then you start. It's almost like structuring that, thinking down that area there was quite a good place for a certain group of people. There were some students over there was a good bus stop over there, tends to be some action around that corner, and then just keep sort of circulating. Really, I think that's been the plan, is to just try and keep busy, organise trips. We went to Port Talbot recently, and that was a really fruitful time. So yeah, I think just keeping busy. So if the impression is that I'm prolific, that's great. But I think you never feel prolific. You never feel like you've done enough, or
I mean, you have what seems like it. You just open up your Instagram and you're like, these portraits just go on forever, and they're all so beautifully composed. And yeah, I think people really want to know. I've got Photos by Motaz here asks, like, would love to know just how you approach people. What's your methodology?
Well, I would say being genuine. You know that that you've got your camera out. You're there. Having a rolly is always a nice conversation starter. It's not there for that, but it is a really good way of sort of engaging with somebody. Saying that you're asking a really quick favor. Do work quickly. Don't keep someone around and then turning them and turning them again or something. Just work as quickly as you can. Think about where the light's coming from and what's in the background, making sure that things aren't poking out of people's heads. But just a really quick engagement, saying that you really like the particular something about them, or that it will work really well on film. That they are almost like a fabulous model for this particular thing, and then you can just run with what you get as the response, really. So if someone's really interested in the camera, really interested in what you're doing and why, show your work quickly. So I think Bruce Davison did that. He had an old family album, didn't he? He'd sort of try and engage with them, say, I'm genuine. I'd usually say, look, I know I'm a nutter asking you for a photograph, but this is where this nutter's coming from. This is what I do. This is how I do it and why. I've published a couple of zines, so I've usually got a copy of one of those, just so I can say. And then, of course, if someone says, no, that's not for me, you can go, that's great, it's no problem. So I think it's having that confidence of thinking, well, what you're doing is a good and important thing, and it's actually a really nice little collaboration. And if you can just get into that kind of groove, then it's not going to take long. And most of those kind of interactions are they're really nice, they're really life affirming. You just get a really lovely little sort of, mini bond, and people then follow on Instagram and ask for their image. And I've still got sort of people just engaged because I've asked them for a photograph some time ago. So it is a really nice way of just getting out and meeting people.
You find you're almost on a little bit of a high after someone says yes, and you take their picture and you're like, yes.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and then you're really looking forward to developing the film and seeing what the neg looks like and scanning it, or maybe even printing it. And you think, it's there's so many little moments that it gives. It's just fantastic.
Talk a bit about, being a bit conscious of taking up people's time, and but also trying to think about composition and where the light's coming from and what position they're in. Do you feel, I mean, like I said, I know I keep going back to this, but you have taken so many. Do you find there's a bit of instinct now at this stage, because you're aware you've got maybe 90 seconds to get this portrait? You just have to kind of work fast.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, definitely it can be even in less than 90 seconds. So I think there's a number of little questions that will run through my mind. Why that person? What is it? Yeah, I like that. That's a really good representation of something. The light, where it is and how nice it is. I've usually got the camera set up to a Sunny 16, so any kind of changes are relatively quick, and it's black and white film a lot of the time, so it's forgiving if I'm a stop over or a couple of stops over. So that's fine. And then you just sort of then quickly into that kind of conversation, and then it's trying to put someone at ease as well quickly, just that you don't have to do anything, you don't have to pose. So my requests are not to smile, just because it just means that you're going to be more natural. Not the fact that I want people scowling or to look miserable, but just from that, someone asking you for a smile, they go into their Insta, their kind of like their selfie face or their posed face, and when you ask them to strip that away, you tend to sort of get something a little bit more honest, a little bit more open. And I think that camera, because they don't know where to look as well. You got those two lenses sitting, and they're trying to look for a cue from me or from the camera. Sometimes they'll ask, and you say just at the top there. But overall, it just lowers some sort of usual camera defense, and you can get something that's just that little bit different. Also, the perspective is slightly lower, so they tend to be a bit more powerful in the frame. I'm slightly looking up, so it actually sort of gives them a sort of more of a slightly hero status in the picture.
Might have thrown in there that you're metering manually as well. Did you say that as well? On the fly?
Yeah, but a lot of the time on the fly. Yeah. So I take the Sekonic sort of handheld 308, and I forget to use it half the time. And it's, the Rollei's still got a sort of a, not accurate, but it sort of gives me at least some kind of like little meter reading that I think, yeah, that's in that region. I can get it wrong, and I kick myself for being lazy or just taken with the quick, do it,
I feel like the Rolleiflex maybe adds a few dimensions in terms of disarming people a bit, the form factor, shooting on film. How do you land on that as your primary tool, and how does it influence you as a photographer?
Well, I came back to photography after many years, but I sort of obviously came back doing the whole digital thing. I had, all the cameras I've had I've really enjoyed. So I've had the Fuji system, I've had some Canons, I've had, multiple cameras, and then kind of got introduced to going back to film, and then I thought, well, that's not going to be me. I don't think I'm particularly practical. I kind of like the fact that maybe digital's doing a lot for me, but then I got kind of caught up with it and really enjoyed it, and then sort of carried on with colour film and experimented with colour. And then I don't know whether it was the pandemic setting some panic waves. I just thought, oh my God, I'm going to be in a bunker. I'm going to be a prepper. I'm going to have, tins that's going to last for years. And I'm going to have film that's, I'm going to have a film full of fridge, and I'm going to have to learn that. And so I suppose black and white was always an occasional treat almost, that I'd sort of spice things up and go, oh, I'm going to now do black and white. So I've kind of inverted and gone mostly black and white. And I've really enjoyed the process of thinking in black and white and producing the images in black and white. And I know all the kind of the cliches are out there about, you're thinking in shades and you're not, but it's so not reality that it becomes a really interesting concept to photograph in regularly, that I ended up sort of building more and more my ideas and capacity around the practice of black and white. So it happened around the same time I was renovating the house, and I thought, actually, I think I could extend the box room and just be able to put a sink in that corner, and then you just then go into developers and enlarging lenses, and before you know it, you're printing. But I've loved it. I have to say, really love it.
Is it fair to say that black and white for portraits in a town centre is a really great way to just remove any of that kind of visual noise going on? You'd have no control over the colours in the background. It could be, I don't know, like a Iceland with like a red and yellow sign. Is that something that's influenced that choice as well?
Well, I know there's aesthetic choices where people don't like to have the signs of the day, or that you're right, some things might clash. I don't think I was probably good enough with colour to sort of manage it to that level. So, when it all worked, it really worked, and when it didn't, it probably looked a bit of a mess. So I think you're right, it does. I don't mind having a sign in the background. I like trying to sort of identify where we are and what we're doing, because within 5 years it'll change again. In 10 years it'll be something completely different. I've got to a vintage now where I feel I'm going back to places and go, oh, well, that building was never there before, and that's not the same anymore. So I just think it's nice that somehow that you add these markers in, rather than trying to strip everything out. Looking at no time at all isn't something that I'm aiming for.
I'm going to jump over to a question from the community again, from Vincent Villager. He says, presumably each portrait is about capturing and documenting the individuality of each sitter, but having now built up a fair body of work, could he talk about the value of it as a collective?
Well, that's great question. I came back to photography from studying psychology of all things, and I think the things that I kind of learned in psychology, especially the social psychology, was that nothing or very few things are real. That we're all constructing something, or we're trying to construct a narrative. We're adding themes, or we're trying to discuss themes, or we're looking from different perspectives. And I think that's what the value of psychology did. It was basically said, well, there is no real truth, but here's another way to look at it, or here's that argument. And really that's what I've been trying to do in a photographic sense, is try and say, here is someone in this setting. What do you think? Almost like just trying to date and time, location, but that's about it. No biography or this is the particular person's name. Just a sense of, because we naturally fill in those blanks. We constantly, make an opinion of, or we kind of maybe fill in where we think they're from, what they're like. We spend our time watching, people watch TV programs about people watching TV programs. So when you've got an image that you kind of want to be able to leave a little bit more open, I think that then slightly informs your choices of people potentially, or in the background. And then when you look collectively, the ideal would be is that people sort of have this sort of recognition of the types of people and of the time, and that maybe that they'll be able to sort of hang, collectively. I did a zine project, which was about the lunchtime walk that I did, from around the COVID times. And it was partly that therapeutic sense of I can get to a certain point and walk back, and if I stop, photograph a little bit, then it'll all be done within that hour, and it won't kind of impact on work or anything else. And it was nice that I'd got this set journey, set locations, and that in effect I'd got this kind of just this photographic sort of map, and then the people on it. So the sequencing was really easy because it was of the particular place, so it followed the map of who I met at what particular time. So it's almost like they are disparate, they're separate people, but they are collectively in that one little journey.
Dan Lebrun asks, I've obviously seen you made a zine and was wondering if you're thinking about moving on to a book at some point.
Well, I think that would be an ideal. I think a lot of people think about putting their work into a book, and I kind of know that there's obviously some sort of pitfalls to that, and I would like to be able to maybe grow into that sort of ability. So the strength of work, the volume of work, something I could edit down to. I've definitely got an idea for the next project, so I'm sort of working on that. But yeah, I think I would love to, but I think I don't want to do it necessarily as like the zine is definitely more of a personal enterprise, and it doesn't really matter if it sells or not, that you're doing it to be able to sort of develop it and develop the skills, but which you do. You learn a lot about either the package or sequencing or the feel of things. So yeah, one day I'd love to, but I think maybe that's not completely my choice.
The zine is stunning, by the way. Was there any like big learning you took from the making of the zine? Did it motivate you in a way you hadn't anticipated, for example?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to make something that symbolised that time. I think a lot of people, spoke about the sort of the COVID times and had such different experiences, and I was lucky in many aspects, but at the same time, kind of went through that. Well, I'm gonna go to work, and everyone's going to be socially distanced, and sort of delivering things in terms of from a work point of view, and then having that as a release. I definitely wanted to be able to say I've made that to remember that. So yeah, I think the next project will be a little bit more how can I put it, whimsical, from a point of view of it's definitely not real, and playing on that thing's not being real. So there'll be still the black and white imagery, but it will not be set necessarily in in a documentary. This was from this place at this time.
I think one of the first photos I actually came across of yours was a colour photo of a butcher's around the corner from my house. There's like a red car parked outside. You mentioned next project black and white as well. Do you feel fairly set on black and white now?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. When people have got digital files, and they say, "Oh, what should this be, color or black and white?" I'm a big believer in that there's an object permanency to an image. So if it is a black and white image, it should be a black and white image. There should never really be, for me, a color version to say, "Oh, I can do this in color, or I can invert this in lots of different ways," because you make a choice about saying, right, I'm using black and white stock, or I'm using film stock. So sometimes it's nice to carry an alternative camera with a different stock altogether, or maybe color, 35mm color, and just go, this is what this looks like using this choice. and I have maybe a black and white version, but they're two different objects rather than that they are the same picture with your choice of color or black and white. But I feel definitely the desire to kind of go from, you know, developing the film through to maybe making handmade prints and handmade versions of what I want to do. So that pushes me way more towards black and white. So yeah, I think color, you know, I'm not anywhere near as strong at color wise, I would say.
Maybe a bit of like an obvious comparison to draw, but you know, Rolleiflex, low angle portraits of people in an urban environment. I think you were in New York recently. You went to a Vivian Maier exhibition. Like, how much has Vivian Maier's work been a influence on you?
Oh, it's massive, isn't it? Really, it would be silly to say that it hasn't. I think the whole story, not just trying to either recreate images, but the whole story of that latent talent not being around. And then I've really got to recently understood that sense of going out, engaging with people, and then maybe never even seeing the images. You know, I felt more at ease in making work and, you know, not sharing it immediately or not posting it immediately or just living with it for some time. And I can start to understand the compulsion to make work and to go out just to take a camera, because I think the sort of the sense of flow and calm that you can get from that, you know, I definitely kind of understand more about that sense of maybe not looking at it later or just building of just a body of work. But I just think the humanity of her view and that sense of the outsider being so close. You know, I think the impact of her work is going to be felt for generations, I think.
Leading on to something you sort of alluded to there, what's your relationship like with social media?
Strained, I'd probably put it. I allow myself one app, you know, one social media account. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on. I left Facebook 4 years ago. I haven't logged in 4 years. So yeah, Instagram's still good from the point of view of that I'm just engaging in a photographic community. But it's a shame that of course people do gather some self-worth from the kind of the feedback, and when the algorithm changes and your feedback kind of changes, then you know you have to try and separate yourself from it. But it'd be a great shame if you don't have that kind of wider community. I don't think an app just for photographers works either. You know, I think that it becomes like a plumber's convention. You know, everyone's standing around with a wrench, and you think, oh great, you know, you've got a wrench as well. Whereas actually you actually want to engage, you know, with wider sort of lots of people, or the people you're taking photographs of. And so yeah, Instagram at the moment still does deliver that, but I'd be worried when it's further down this TikTok route, because you know I can't really see myself making videos and being a face. I think, you know, this face for radio is probably good behind the still image.
Hey, you need to, yeah, you're self-deprecating.
I'm from
But
Birmingham. No, there you
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah, I don't get this all these new apps for photographers to show other photographers. Yeah, I feel like it needs to be somewhere where everybody uses it, so your work can reach other people. But yeah, this whole thing, like you said about applying some kind of self-worth to your following, and I don't know. We talk about it a lot on this channel. It's I still use it every day, and I don't think I will stop. But it seems to I'm seeing a slight shift. Maybe that photography seems to be bubbling up a bit again away from video, but maybe that's just wishful thinking. I don't know.
Well, I think they play with you on such a micro level, don't they? In that respect, you know, if you haven't posted for a bit and you go, oh look, you know, we'll boost you for a little bit more, and they somehow sort of find it wonderful that I've reached 5% of my own following. You think, oh, thanks. Yeah.
What would you like people to take away from your work? Say someone saw a big body of your portraits from Birmingham for the first time. What would you like people to like feel about the city of Birmingham?
I'd like them to think that it is as it is. It is a diverse place, and that means that there are, interesting people within it. It's got a reputation that was probably forged from older times. It's a more interesting place than maybe the reputation allows. There's always a slight sort of sensitivity where people from Birmingham always think that they've got to kind of try and say it's all right, it's pretty good. But I think if anything from the photography comes away, that there is that sense of diversity and there's a bit of energy to it, that would be good.
Craig wrote, "What gets you out of bed in the morning?"
Photography wise, I think just an ongoing obsession, and I think as long as I've got a few roles to develop, a few roles to scan, a few roles to sort of investigate, make some prints, as long as I'm in that cycle, then I'm okay. I feel all right. If I'm out of that kind of cycle, if I've got no new work planned, no great trips planned, nothing that I think is bubbling under in any way, that makes me feel a bit anxious. So just making sure I've got I've got something to develop, I've got something to still make. That's what gets me out of bed.
Yeah, I have this constant sort of struggle. If I haven't taken a picture I'm that happy with for a couple of months, I'm like, oh, have I forgotten how to do it? And I have to constantly be like, no, it'll come. You just have to, just a long game,
Yeah.
How long have you been taking these portraits in Birmingham?
I would say that they were on and off probably about 2015, 2014-ish. I was trying to, as I said, from the psychology side of things, I was trying to look at how the kind of maybe sort of topographical side of things. I look at the city from a less people or that point. So I was making some work around that, and then I did even try to do some documentary projects where I kind of embedded myself into a particular news agent or a sort of convenience store for 4 months in the morning and the evenings, and sort of built kind of stories around the people visiting there. But then the kind of the gaps that I'd get, that sense of I've got nothing on, I'm not working on. So that's where I started doing deliberate walks to find people. So I think that started at about 2016-ish, I think. And I've experimented then with different cameras and systems and, colour and black and white from between then.
Final question, I think. Is there one piece of advice you'd give to somebody who just really wants to get into approaching people for portraits?
Yeah, don't be nervous. I think people smell people being nervous. Be open about what you want to do and why you want to do it. If you're digital shooting, just sort of be open about your work. Show it if you can, or show the camera, just to try and allay that sense of fear. I mean, even though we are signing away our rights or being on under video cameras, probably left, right, and centre, people can feel that they've got a little bit of agency, a bit of control if they reject you or if they feel slightly fearful. So being really open and sort of engaging with what you're doing and being passionate about it, that sense of you really want to do this and you've chosen them and you can have a nice interaction, that would, for me, would be the sort of the tip of beyond all tips, really.
That's what it's about, isn't it? Having a good vibe, being chill.
Yeah, if you suspect someone's going to do something, what are you going to do with that image? What you're doing? Why? And you somehow feel defensive because someone has started on a particular, maybe even a slightly negative track. Then you'll not really recover it. But I've had people march up to me, literally shouting at me, thinking that I'm taking a picture or doing whatever. And as long as you completely are open, even your body language is open, that you're not frightened of anything, that you're doing something that's very legitimate, and you want to share what you're doing. Most people are really reasonable, even though they've started on a threatening or a threatened position. I was going to say, actually, because the Vivian Mayer exhibition, they've got a floor in Photographiska of Bruce Gilden's personal selection, sort of why these, I think he's called it. And within that, there's 3 images that he took in West Brom. So that's a satellite town in the West, in the West Midlands. And I saw him do a talk that very night that he must have taken those shots. And he said, considering he's been to Haiti, lived in Brooklyn and Coney Island, all those things, he said it was the most scariest place he's ever been. and then someone sort of said, his opening gambit with someone was, "Hey sir, nice shirt," and he went, "Fuck off." And he just felt like he was totally frightened by this whole experience of being in West Brom. And I thought, well, if I'm sort of, doing it regularly in Birmingham, then I must be all right. I must be doing okay. So it was really nice to see those images, those big West Bromwich faces. I thought, yeah, I remember that. I remember that day.
Separate to Vivian Meyer, is there anybody else you'd like to call out that's really spoken to you over the years?
Yeah, I think Bruce Davidson is a hero. I think Subway is probably one of the finest sort of projects kind of put together. That mixture of documenting, making something that actually looks beautiful in really challenging conditions. I think it's just really fantastic. Gordon Parks, I really love Gordon Parks' work. I think I'm drawn to some of that kind of, it's always the older film aesthetic. It's that that sense of document and history along with the pictures as well that you tend to get from that. So yeah, I probably could sit here for ages and list that. But when people are looking for inspiration, it tends to be the same names trotted out, and obviously that's for a reason. But I'm always wary that, oh dear, I'm not adding anything new for people to go off and discover.
That was really fun. Thank you very much for your time. I feel like, your dedication, the way you've honed your craft over the years. I mean, over the years, it just really, really shows. Very motivating to speak to you. I want to go out and take some portraits now.
Oh, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it.